What's up guys, it's Donna with Dog Liaison, where I coach you on how to enhance your dog's mental health. I'm a professional dog trainer, and on this channel we break down scientific research in order to inform us on how to train dogs. I'm on Instagram to find out your top questions, and today we're doing a Q&A. Let's get into it. The first question is it possible for a dog to be reactive but not barking, pulling, etc. with silent reactivity? And the answer is 100% yes. In fact, I had a video recently called Reactivity or Aggression, and you can check that video out where I deep dive on exactly what reactivity is, but without a doubt, a dog can be silently reactive. The next question is, when you need to take your dog into a city, is it a backpack an okay idea? So I think they're asking like, is it okay if I put a backpack on my dog? And the first answer that I always have to that is ask your dog. Your dog gets the final say on whether or not they're desensitized to that and whether or not they're comfortable with having something on their back. First and foremost, if your dog is okay with it, then I'm okay with it. But some things to think about is, what is the goal of having a backpack on? Is it just convenience, or are you trying to give them some excessive job? You're tiring your dog out more, and when a dog is tired, they're more likely to behave in undesirable manners. In the same way that like when I'm tired, I get really cranky. Your dog is gonna get more tired with a backpack on. So those are just some factors to come in play. Generally speaking, it's not like a good thing or a bad thing. It just depends on with context. And first and foremost, your dog has final say. How to get my dog to stop barking at people when they greet or come to our house? So my first question would be, we need to be establishing what the association is. So the association is like, I'm barking because I like you and I'm super happy that you're here. That's going to be a little bit different than, am I barking because I am protective and I don't like that you're here? Barking can happen for a lot of different reasons, and the first thing that you would need to establish is, what is the motivation behind the bark? Is it to build distance or increase distance? If it's meant to build distance, to say I need you to leave, then you're going to want to check out this video right here about aggressive tutorial on how to get your dog more comfortable around his trigger. It's a full comprehensive tutorial. By the way, I will have all the videos that I mentioned in here in the description box as well, so you can check those out. If on the other hand your dog is just like super enthusiastic, then I do have a tutorial on how to get your dog to not jump on strangers, and you can check out that video as well. First, establish what the association is, or what the intent behind the bark is, and then that will influence which tutorial you use, and honestly which tutorial will be most effective. The next question I have is how to overcome competing motivators in training. So this kind of stems from a conversation, something that you hear a lot, where it's like, you need to be the most valuable thing in the space. You're in competition with everything else in the space. And this was a mantra that I used for many years in my training career, where I would tell my clients, you are in competition with everything in your space. I have to say now that I am a little bit more educated and that I have worked with harder anxiety cases. I don't always believe in that. I don't necessarily think that you can always compete with everything in the environment. I think that's a tall order. Instead, what I would say is, what behaviors can compete? So maybe it's not necessarily that you can compete with your dog, with the environment, but maybe it's that you can give your dog a behavior that is competitive. Maybe you can give your dog a new motor pattern, a new sequence of events to follow through that is competitive with the environment, that is competitive, that is more reinforcing. That's kind of how you want to think of it, is instead of like, can I compete? You want to think, can I create a behavior that can compete? The next question is it too late to help my 2-year-old extremely reactive dog? Absolutely. 2 years old is not that old at all. He's got an entire life ahead of him. You owe it to him to recover his mental health and his perception of the environment. So without a doubt, yes, please help this dog. How do I get my dog to stop barking nonstop in the backyard? The first thing, like it was mentioned before, is find out the association. But secondly, this is a very comprehensive thing. This is not something that there's like one technique. Especially on YouTube, it can kind of get oversimplified, where it's like, just have them recall, just call them to you and reinforce that. That is a serious oversimplification, especially when we're talking about the backyard where they are running loose. Depending on how big your backyard is, there's a lot of space between you and them. The first thing I recommend is checking out one of the tutorials that I mentioned earlier in the description box for reactivity and for resolving dog aggression. But I definitely recommend making sure that you're understanding the root cause of the bark. Based off of how do I get my dog to stop barking, that kind of insinuates to me that we're not clear on what the bark is asking, on what the bark is doing. What's the function of the bark? Because we should never really want to have a dog stop barking entirely. A bark is part of their normal behavior repertoire. It's part of what makes them a dog. So our goal is not to eliminate the bark. It's just to make sure that the function and the context that the bark is occurring is different. How do I help mitigate anxiety in my dog brought on by my toddler's emotional stress? So basically this sounds like the toddler's emotions are making your dog more anxious. And this makes total sense. This happens a lot, especially like when babies cry. This can be very stress inducing for dogs. Some things to think about. Is there management that could be in place that you're not putting in place? Is it possible for our dog to be not around your toddler when those emotions are occurring? Especially if they're not occurring very often. I don't know how often this problem is occurring. Maybe it's only, a couple times a week. Maybe it's every single day. Maybe it's multiple times a day. But is there a way for us to make sure that our dog is not around that situation? That's number one. If that's only possible to do sometimes, but not all the time, then you want to think about doing a behavior change program. Again, tutorials in the description box, please check those out for a comprehensive approach. But I really think that we need to move past sort of this simplification, this oversimplification of just well, you just give your dog a treat and everything will be better. Or, oh, you just put your dog on the mat and everything will be better. You need several steps. You can't have just one thing and that is magically the answer. If you have two dogs, how do you know what is play, when it's too far, and when you might be encouraging aggression? First and foremost, I always say you need to be very fluent in both of your dog's stress and bravery behaviors. Emphasis on your dogs, because it's not enough to just say oh, I know what a lip lick is, and oh, I know what a play bow is. You really want to understand how your dog's stress repertoire functions. First step, if you don't even know what stress bravery signals look like, then you want to be educated on those. I will make sure those are linked in the description box below. I have a full hour-long video talking about all of the stress signals that you need to be fluent in. So definitely want to check that out. I do think though that the next step to that, the next step to being aware of what they are, is how do they apply to your dog. We need to make sure that we know what your dogs are saying. That's number one. Number two, how do you know when it's going too far? Sometimes it's a matter of, is one of the dogs trying to opt out? I don't want to necessarily say they always have to opt out, because sometimes they're both kind of egging each other on. But that is a good tell to start with, is one of the dogs trying to get away or trying to stop the play session and the other dog's just not allowing that. Now, assuming both dogs are just going and they're snarling and all that, I really recommend focusing on arousal control. So now it's less about, are they gonna turn into a fight? Is it gonna turn sour? But now it's more, can we control their arousal? Can we control how excitable they get and help them regulate themselves when they are that excitable? So we're talking about building up the excitement, asking them to harness that and come back to you and interrupt it and then get started again and then come back to you and then, settle for a second, maybe do a sit, breathe for a moment, and then get excitable again. And so we're really kind of messing around a little bit with their excitement levels. So that's assuming that both dogs want to keep playing, both dogs want to keep going. It's just that for you at least, you feel that they're excitable too much. What that really tells me is that we need to practice their arousal control. The last question we have is, what calming signals can you as a human give to a shy, nervous dog? First and foremost, for those that don't know, calming signals are just a name only. We don't have any scientific literature that says that they do in fact calm the dogs, at least that they don't serve the function of calming another dog. So I think what this is asking, is there any behaviors that we can do that's going to calm another dog? From a behavioral standpoint, dogs are really good at understanding outcomes. They know when certain actions are going to result in certain outcomes. So for example, if your body language is turned away from them, that's probably going to result in the outcome of you not engaging whatsoever, right? If you're not looking at them, if you're not touching them, if you're not acknowledging them, they perceive that as the outcome of, this person's not going to touch me. That could be good or bad. It depends on the dog's perception, right? On the other hand, if you are giving eye contact and smiling, sometimes that's a good and bad thing too. Something that I recommend is that you're very consistent with your behavior. So this is hard when you don't know the dog. When you don't know the dog, I always recommend defaulting to ignoring the dog. But if the dog is yours, or if you're at least if it's a family dog that you know of, you want to be very consistent, be very predictable, because what this means is that your dog this dog anyway, is going to be able to anticipate your actions based off of your behavior. They're going to be able to say, okay, last time she smiled at me and gave a treat, so this means that she's probably going to continue smiling and giving me a treat. Again, you need to be in a dialogue with the dog's behavior, right? It's just because something worked yesterday doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work today. You want to make sure that your behavior is acting as a communication tool, but you're also allowing the dog to communicate back to you. And if the dog is telling you what your actions are doing are not being perceived correctly, it's up to you to change your behavior. It's not up to you to keep doing the same thing and convince them that, no, I promise I really am a good person. To them, they don't really care your promises. They want to see your actions. If they're telling you, hey, I don't like that, say, okay, do you like this instead? Do you like that instead? But little things like just having a really soft demeanor, maybe not coming on too strong, definitely not reaching your hand out and touching them over the head. That's a no-no. And making sure that you are responding to them in the way that they're responding to you. We call this principle mirroring. If a dog is moving kind of slow and sensitive towards you, it doesn't make sense for you to be very outlandish and bright. You want to kind of mirror what the dog is giving you, and it's always acting from a place of questions. You're always asking, is this okay? Is that okay? Is this all right? Is that all right? The more you can go in unassuming, the more likely it is the dog's gonna come up to you. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you get notified when I drop a new video, and I'll see you guys next week.